support my tongue. You will never be the same.
And with the full catastrophe, he didn't mean it was all bad.
Oh, that I worship has a way of saying, don't play with.
I invite you to the dance with the Lord of the dance.
God didn't call America to do what she's doing in the world now.
Please dance.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Remote Pastoral Care. We, as you can tell, have a full house of people joining us today. We're going to go through the introductions here in a minute, but first I just want to say thanks for joining us. As usual, I am Don. I'm the pastor of this unfinished community project, whatever the hell you want to call it, and I'm joined by a whole bunch of other people who I think should now introduce themselves. Courtney, you want to kick us off?
Sure. If you've been watching this series, you've seen me a lot. My name is Courtney Fraley. I'm just sort of a loudmouth, questioning, just regular and highly irregular person. So, hello again.
All right, Steve, you want to take next?
Yeah, if you watch this, you've seen me a few times as well. I'm just a longtime friend of the Dons. We went to school together, and we talked a little bit about my faith path, where I grew up in a more conservative church, and now I've been attending an Episcopal church after a long time away from it. So as we continue to delve into more topics, I just have a varied background. So we'll see where we go today.
All right, Audra, you want to take the penultimate introduction?
Hi, I'm Audra Warwick. I've been on the last couple of episodes, just recently became the education director, which is pretty cool. Also knew Don growing up, and that's really about it for an introduction right now.
I'm going to say from here, I couldn't tell if you said education director or agitation director, and either is good for me, I'll be honest.
Okay, I'm sorry, I was a little quiet.
All right, and today we are joined by a brand new face who we're happy to see. That'd be Jay. You want to give us an introduction? Tell us about yourself.
Sure. My name is Jay. I grew up in the Lutheran church. Around the age of 12, I had an interest in becoming a pastor. And around that same time, I started experiencing feelings towards men. So I didn't really have a name to put with it at the time because I was so incredibly sheltered. As I started to get into high school, I learned what homosexuality was and kept denying that that's what I was. I kept saying to myself that maybe I'm just bisexual, maybe there's still hope for me to date a girl at some point. And I did date some girls in high school, but the relationship never got very far. Once I got to college, I studied to be a pastor. And about halfway through my college career, I admitted to myself that I was gay and began coming out to people. It was not an easy experience at all. There are people at college that told me I was going to hell. I had friends who I had been studying to be a pastor with who just completely abandoned me, never talked to me again. I had friends that said that they wanted to help me overcome this disease and that it was just a choice I was making. When I came out to my parents, they had me go to counseling with the youth director at my church, which was incredibly awkward because he was like a role model to me when I was growing up. He quoted a lot of Bible passages at me about homosexuality, said it sounded like I was abandoning God, that he didn't want to have to visit me in the hospital in 20 years when I was dying from AIDS. And it was at that point that I really started to get away from my faith, which that was my entire identity up until that point was my faith. I listened solely to Christian music. I wore shirts that had Christian sayings on them. I was studying to be a pastor, and I had to give that up because of how conservative the Lutheran church I was a part of was. So after I gave up my faith, I remained agnostic. I never outright said I was atheist. I said I still believed that there was something out there, but I felt like the Christian God, especially because of the Christians I interacted with, just was not the path for me at the time. And it took about 10 years for me to eventually to come back to some sort of faith. And that was because of the person who would become my husband. He was a Catholic, and he pretty much said to me that I shouldn't allow others to determine what my faith is. And I slowly started coming back to the faith, and I'm kind of at a point now where I believe in Jesus. I read the Bible, but I have so much trauma from interacting with Christians and from church that I have not felt comfortable going back to church yet.
Pretty understandable. It's a hell of a journey there. And for my part, I'm getting in the habit of saying this, but as a pastor of a Christian denomination, let me be the first to say, damn, I am sorry, man. On behalf of Christianity as organized religion, for the crap, just the pieces you've told me so far, and I'm sure there's a million things you haven't. Boy, man.
Oh yeah.
On behalf of everybody who'll never say it, let me say I'm sorry for everything you had to go through.
I appreciate it. It's been a struggle, but finally on good footing with Jesus again, I think, and really starting to explore my faith more and trying to find a way back into a church where I don't feel like I'm going to have an anxiety attack all the time.
That is a good goal to have, and boy, just in the journey you highlighted, there are a lot of different pieces we could discuss. I'm going to start us off with one thing I noticed, which was, and this is going to seem like a weird place to start, but I promise you, I think it's mineable. You talked about being within the Christian bubble, only listening to Christian music, only reading Christian books, et cetera, et cetera. And that was particularly, when it comes to all these other issues, that was, I always thought, was the piece that starts it. This belief that Christianity must necessarily be an isolated environment, that is only a specific closed selection of things that you can and can't do. And that speaks in my mind to the fact that people who are judgmental against people for being part of the LGBT community or for whatever reason have their understanding of faith rooted in terms of control and not necessarily in terms of liberation. Because of course, as we all know, the whole point of the damn book is liberation. That's what it's there for. And if you're not experiencing that, well, then you're not doing it right. So, I hear stuff like that. And before you even got to them judging you as you're coming out, I'm like, I can see it right there. That's the seed where this all begins, is when we start saying it is this and only this. It is so narrow, so focused, and we can't be anything else. You can't have other ideas. You can't have other music. I'll tell you a story. Once when I grew up as a church musician. And for one of my debut piano performances, I dove into Zanarkand from Final Fantasy X as a prelude for the church service. Of course I'm a nerd. Have y'all met me? And those who didn't notice, but the few who did were like, "You're committing sacrilege." The hell, why? Like, what is it that we can't find the divine in everything? So
I mean, I played Debussy's Arabesque 1 as opposed to before. I'm like, if you can find the divine in most music, if you look.
Well, if you're policing, just instrumental music as whether it was written specifically as church music or not, that's really starting to split hairs. There's not even lyrics to criticize.
But that right there is exactly what I'm talking about. That sort of insane hair splitting in the means of establishing a sense of control over the environment. That is the beginning. And then it gets on to things like misinterpreting the Bible so you can say gays are bad, which, I'm sure you've all heard this from me before. That's not a thing that's mentioned in the Bible.
I've always had a struggle with the interpreting, like limiting the consumable material to items made by the in-group for the in-group is basically what it is.
Yeah.
I have an example of that right now. The other day I found my catechism for the Lutheran Church, and I looked in the index for what it said for homosexuality. And it gave me, go to Article 56, which is under Part 21 that says, when do people have other gods? And then
My
you go
God.
to part 56, which is Matthew 28:19, that says, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Spirit. That is the only thing that is listed under homosexuality in the Lutheran Catechism. And it is under having other gods.
Like, I gotta admit, from a heterosexual standpoint, there have been moments in the sexual experience where I'm feeling a bit worshipful, but I've never taken it to that extent. Like, are y'all doing something different than we are?
I don't know. And then when reading it backwards like that, I go, am I supposed to be baptizing other people in the, because I'm not entirely straight. Like, am I supposed to be bringing people to that? Or is this the opposite, where you are looking at me like this is something that is having another God, that I'm putting my lust above what he wants?
Where are our
my
gay
life.
evangelists, damn it?
And that's where, like, when I told Don, I was like, yeah, I'm born and raised Lutheran. Like, and then I found this when unpacking my books and saw it and took a step backward in time, just like I'm sure Jay has probably done, of what you were raised with, because I was raised the same way, going to church, listening to the music, wearing the shirts, doing the prayer circles before school, like all sorts of things. And then looking backwards and going, wow, this is a lot. This is really heavy.
Yeah, they try to keep you immersed in that culture, and when you are experiencing something that is not of that culture, it makes you feel like you're doing something wrong, that there's something incredibly wrong with you. And it's just a system of control to try to stretch what they believe. And it, just that passage from the Lutheran Catechism, that's a huge stretch to justify homophobia.
Yeah, and that's one that's always blown me away, because we've seen this. It ain't just the Lutherans who've used this argument. Let's be perfectly honest. But this whole if you're gay, you're worshiping another god is a deliberate misunderstanding of so many things, and it's that is one piece I've never understood, and I've had many fights with religious folk from the beginning about how we misinterpret so many things deliberately in order to assert this kind of control. Like, I remember having this discussion with people in my church about homosexuality and asking them, what about being gay has to do with worshiping God? Like, that's a separate issue. And they never did create a good idea. They just, well, it just is, which I'm sure that is an answer you've gotten a few times too. It just is.
Oh yeah, sounds very familiar.
You're questioning God if you ask questions.
Yeah, I once got kicked out of a Sunday school class when someone said, "You're questioning God," and I looked them dead in the face and said, "No, I'm questioning you."
Yeah, I actually have another example from the Lutheran Church, because I also found my certificate of confirmation. And in the bottom of it, obviously it gives you like your name, the day you were, you went through confirmation, like you finally took your first communion kind of thing. And then at the bottom it's signed, and then there's always a Bible passage that is listed specifically for you, because in order to take confirmation, you have to go through years of catechism. Like, you don't get confirmed until you're like in the 8th grade. And mine was listed as Romans 6:4. So obviously my pastor knew me pretty well, and knew the leading questions that I was asking him constantly, which also had to do with sexuality. And he decided Romans 6:4 was appropriate for me, which is, we were therefore buried with him through baptism into death, in order that, just as Christ were raised from the dead through the glory of the Father, we too may live a new life. Like, he knew what I was struggling with and made that
And
It's a little passive aggressive.
oh, you want passive
And
aggressive?
very much so.
You want passive aggressive? He only quoted one verse, and
Yes.
expecting you to look back at the other thing. And let me bring up what Romans 6 starts with. What then are we to say? Should we continue in sin in order that grace may abound? Like,
Yes, exactly.
the whole chapter starts. It's like, and again, this is the sort of thing that is often used against people from the LGBTQ community, but it has nothing to do with that.
I remember sitting through confirmation classes, and there was one in particular where they spent a good 10 minutes just listing off things that we could not believe if we wanted to be confirmed. And if we wanted to be, if we weren't confirmed, we wouldn't be members of the church. So they held our faith almost kind of hostage with these things that we couldn't do. We couldn't believe in evolution. We couldn't have feelings for members of the same sex, just all sorts of crazy stuff.
Oh,
Which
yes,
again,
absolutely. Did you have to take a test too?
Oh yeah, yep. There was.
Oh
a
yeah,
test.
like the 120 question test, and you had to like get a bunch of it right, and like it was insane.
It was.
It's
Let me
bringing
go
me
ahead and
back
say,
to
too,
our
that
marriage classes where our junior pastor was like not ready to fight me and was just like, now I know you're going to have some disagreements with some things that we talk about today. And I'm just like, and Scott's just like,
doing one of these.
yeah.
Yeah, and the thing that blows me away is that list of things you just gave, it's not only nowhere in the Bible, because I mean, I think at this point it's old hat to say that none of this shit's in the Bible. Like the Bible doesn't talk about homosexuality, the Bible doesn't talk about evolution, the Bible doesn't talk about science in those terms. None of it's there. Fair toss, by the way, Luke is a medical textbook and considered actually a science book. So, fun fact there. But all of that aside, none of that shit's even in the doctrinal standards of these denominations. Like the denominations themselves don't have established positions on these. And in fact, several of the confessional statements for these denominations, and I'm speaking here now, of course, of my own, because I don't know the Lutherans quite as well. Most of these denominations take confessional statements and standards of belief that deliberately reject these positions, but yet they still put them on their confirmation and catechism. Like, you must believe this. Why? Even your denomination doesn't even believe this. What the hell?
Probably for the same reason that like the publicly visible church as a whole seems to take Jesus's overall message of, hey, what I want you to do is not work towards building a dragon horde and give everything you have to improve the lives of other people, and just kind of toss that out the window and been like, yeah, he said that, but that's not practical. Like,
well, someone who got his ass fired from his last job for telling the rich members of the congregation that Jesus said, sell all you have and follow me. Yeah, I get it.
you've been fired for some good reasons.
Yeah, you really have.
I kind of feel that there is such a thing as good trouble, and if you're not getting into it, then you aren't pastoring correct. But yeah, so there's like so many pieces to these issues that are rooted. It's easy for us to say they're rooted in ignorance, and there is ignorance as a component here too, but there's almost a degree of spiritual malice, you could even say, in the way these things
I was
are.
just about to go there, because they always say never attribute to malice what you contribute to ignorance, but I don't believe it in these cases, in some of these cases.
Never attribute to malice what can be more easily attributed to ignorance, sure, but there also reaches a point where it's not easily attributable to ignorance. Like we're talking about cases here, like where it's in direct defiance of the Bible, of doctrinal standards, of things that all you have to do is look at what big old J-Dog was saying there, and you can see plain and simple it was not that thing. One of my favorite stories to talk about is Jesus healing the centurion's servant. You guys familiar with that one?
Yeah,
Very.
I know where you're going with this one. I
Yeah, you
forgot.
know, because I don't shut up about this damn passage because nobody talks about it.
Very.
Are you familiar with this one, Jay?
Sounds familiar, but it's been a while since I studied the Bible too in depth.
Fair. I'm an absolutely terrible pastor when it comes to being able to cite chapter and verse of anything. So I will tell you this takes place in at least one of the 4 Gospels, and I'm not going to be able to explain more from there. I know it's in there. The hell if I know where, because I'm recording a Zoom meeting right now, and I ain't going to Google the damn thing.
Yeah, dig it up for us later and put it in the.
Yeah, I'll drop it in the description later on.
Yeah.
But basically the point of it, what happens is Jesus is walking along, you know, kind of Jesus-ing in his Jesus-y way and doing Jesus stuff. And this Roman centurion comes up to him and says, dude, my slave is sick. You mind making with the heelsies? And Jesus is like, yeah, sure. I'll head over to your place. I'll take care of it right away. And the centurion's like, nah, man, you're Jesus. Like, just say the thing and it'd be done. And Jesus is like, oh, dude, snap, you're right. I can do that thing. Your faith is awesome. You're the best, man. And he goes about his day. I have paraphrased that a little bit. It's a little more the message than NRSV, but you get the gist.
Message.
But that all said, you know, when we talk about this one in church, and it does come up in church often, we're like, oh yeah, Jesus really had respect for that soldier's faith. But what we don't look at is that if we look in the Greek and if we look at the cultural context surrounding it, that is the closest example to a standard homosexual relationship that we have ever seen in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, anywhere in the Bible. Because of course, in those days, the design of relationships such as we have them now wasn't a thing. But this kind of male soldier and his male head of household slave, because that's what he was. He was the head of his household, an equal status position in a very intimate relationship together. The term slave was applied in the same way that you could just as easily apply slave to the term wife in those days, because marital relationships were property based because people were horrible in those days. So right here, you have one example of Jesus coming face to face with what is effectively a gay man saying, my husband's not doing so hot, you mind helping? And Jesus didn't say, love the sinner, hate the sin, dude. None of that happened. He was just like, yeah, I got you. Also, your faith is awesome and you're the best. Sorry.
I would add from what I know about that story is the particular Greek words used for the servant in different passages cross-referenced to each other have the word designating him as very important, like head of household, but also they use another word somewhere along the way. I think it appears in 2 Gospels, which is why you get this connotation. That in the other Gospel, they use a word for a beloved servant that would only be used for an intimate relationship or a child.
Yeah.
And the child's not going to be head of household. So process of elimination.
Yeah. Although given the standards of the time, the child could be in an intimate relationship because they were weird back then.
Yes, but the child would not be head of household, would not be the esteemed servant, basically.
Yeah.
So I believe what happens. You can Google this later and tell me if I'm wrong, but it's in 2 Gospels and the words use proselytization. It's a gay relationship.
Yeah, almost certainly. And again, that's the stuff we don't talk about, you know, in Sunday school, in church, because we're too worried about pissing off the conservatives. We just don't kind of buy into this sort of stuff like it's something new. But I mean, this isn't something new that has come up. This is something that's been present throughout all of Christendom. Notwithstanding, and I'm going to blank on the names here, but if we go into the Christian mythology, which is something we don't talk about a whole hell of a lot, like the stories of the martyrs and all that kind of early Catholic stuff, there are a lot of stories like Perpetua and Felicity in those, who are 2 women who are doing the martyrdom thing and had great affection for each other and were close and inseparable in ways that are just like, wow, they had a great friendship.
Gals who are pals
Yeah.
over and over through history, and they were roommates.
I was gonna say, or this is my friend who's also an aunt. Yeah, just
My
exactly
traveling
like that.
companion.
Yes,
Traveling companion. There you go.
yes, my roommate of 30 years.
I'm gonna go ahead and suggest that we should keep using the term traveling companion, because then you can claim that all women are the doctor. And that just works.
I do like that.
So, I mean, aside from me ranting about how people misabuse the Bible, like, what else is there that we can say about this that hasn't been said?
Can we visit another story, the words of Jesus' mouth when he was talking about marriage and divorce, and the verse particularly about some being eunuchs because they were born that way?
Yeah, I might have to look this one up, but I think that is a good one.
That's a very good point.
Are there intersex people in the Bible?
It basically,
Oh, yeah.
yes,
Well, I'm
and
pretty
but it
sure-
also basically said, it came out of Jesus' mouth basically, that it's like some people are born to not be able to have kids, either by relationship, sexuality, or whatever. So I think I don't know what part it's in though.
I'm seeing Matthew 19 in a quick Google search. So,
Is it one of those where like barren was a misinterpreted word or something like that?
No, that's more to it than that. Like even in the King James, it was still said some are eunuchs because they were born that way.
all right.
Sounds
Well,
like
let's
an early way of attempting to describe intersex people.
Absolutely.
All right.
Find it, Don?
Here's the passage. We got Matthew 19. I'm going to go ahead and read this to you. Thank God for smartphones. So, when Jesus had finished saying these things, he left Galilee and went to the region of Judea beyond the Jordan. Large crowds followed him, and he cured them there. Some Pharisees came to him, the bastards, and to test him, they asked, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any cause?" He answered, "Have you not read that the one who made them at the beginning made them male and female, and said, 'For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh'? So they're no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate." They said to him, "Why then did Moses command us to give a certificate of dismissal and to divorce her?" He said to them, "It's because you were so hard-hearted that Moses allowed you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for unchastity and marries another commits adultery." That's a whole section we can unpack on its own later, because that's Jesus going.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. That's like,
yeah. The
I was
context
gonna
behind-
say that was my wedding vows
Yeah, the
in
context
the Lutheran
behind that,
church.
yikes.
without digging too far into that, the context of that has to do a lot with kind of the upper crust of Jewish society that were basically using marriage as a way of dating. Basically, they would just marry, divorce, do that all the freaking time, so that they could just kind of do whatever and get around other social mores with regards to sex and relationships and stuff like that. It's basically abusing religion in order to accomplish a goal. And he's like, no, dude, that's not what marriage is for. Like, if you want to actually enter into it. Like divorce, because he says at the end, like, except for unchastity, which that's the translation, I'm sure, and I'm saying this without looking into it, I'm sure the translation is more nuanced than simply sleeping around. But
I would hope so.
There's a lot to unpack with that one, but I can tell you it's not Jesus saying no divorces for anyone, despite what the Catholic Church might tell you. But then, where it gets interesting, his disciples said to him, "If such is the case of a man with his wife, it is better not to marry." But he said to them, "Not everyone can accept this teaching, but only those to whom it is given. For there are eunuchs who have been so from birth, and there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by others, and there are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Let anyone accept this who can." First off, right there, he's describing an intersex conditions, like the whole spectrum of intersex conditions right there. Like, some people are this way, some people are this way. What the hell ever.
He's also taking it a step further.
Yeah, as Jesus does. And I have always I've always loved the last line of passages like this. There was a story when I was studying to be a pastor. It was one of my favorite encounters, and we're learning church polity, which is basically the law of the church, because we've got our own legal code because we're a church. Of course, we fucking do. And you're reading through it, and it says must do, should do, can do, and it was drilled into us. It's like these things there, these words actually mean something. Not all of these are proscriptions. Like must believe in Jesus, sure. Ought to means different than that. So, ought to participate in the life of the church. Okay, but we're not going to kick you the hell out for it. Things like that. And so I take that mentality, and then I look at Jesus at the end here saying, let anyone accept this who can. And I'm like, that right there is like saying, he's not saying, I hereby in the name of my Father in heaven mandate this particular belief system with regard to human sexuality to all and sunder. He's saying, yeah, if it works for you. Here's the truth, make of this what you will. And then he moves the hell on because, and this is important, mandating policy with respect to human sexuality did not show up on J-Man's radar.
You're gonna have to stop calling him that. It makes you sound like a really unhip youth pastor. I gotta be straight with you.
Hey, I am wildly unhip and I own that. But
but it's I don't like the term cringe, but you're getting there.
Hey, I do what I can. A little bit of cringe helps keep people interested.
Well, I would say thank you for expounding on it, because as we're talking about numerous LGBT issues, not many people realize that there's mention of intersex people in the Bible at all, because they kind of gloss over that. It's in one passage. So
yeah. But again, this is that running example of we hear this clarion call from conservatives every day of our life that this is just some new thing, this new fangled way of thinking, that there weren't always so many gays, there weren't always trans people have only been a thing for 10 years or whatever the hell they're arguing now. And it's like, these things have always been there. These people have always been there. Y'all have just been ignoring it. And that's really what the problem is. Sorry, I got my preach on there for a minute.
People have been so violently against things in the LGBT community that we've had to hide. I mean, when I first started having feelings for guides and finally had a term to attach to it, I tried to hide because I was always told that you can't be gay and be a Christian. So that's why these conservatives are saying, oh, these things just now are coming into existence. It's because we had to hide.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I spent the majority of my life hiding, even though I never hid. When I got married to a straight man who is also a very liberal, but also a very spiritual man. And we had a child together, and we were together for a while. But when we got divorced and I finally told people that I said bisexual because that was the easiest way for me to explain it to people who are heterosexual. I got a lot of backlash from certain people that were members of his family saying oh, well, he didn't know this. And it's like, you don't think I was with somebody for 10 years and they didn't know this? He absolutely knew this and he was perfectly okay with it. And it was never an issue.
And side note, let me just go ahead and throw that out there. As the resident heterosexual here, let me go ahead and say that if he was your husband for any length of time and didn't know that, then he was a terrible husband.
Exactly. Thank you. And yeah, so my coming out phase was way later in life. I always knew, but I did the same thing Jay did. You stuff it down. You think there's something wrong with you. You know, darn certain if you say something to your parents, especially if you're under 18, you're going to end up in a conversion camp. That's just the way it's going to be. And so for someone like me who is pansexual, which means I really, gender means nothing to me when I'm attracted to somebody. it can be literally, it doesn't matter if it's a trans person. It doesn't matter if they're a bisexual human being. It doesn't matter, I'm not going to hit on like a gay man because obviously it's not even worth it. Like, I'm not on his radar. So that's not even a thing
at that point.
But yeah, exactly. But it took me a long time because it was so much easier for me I am an easy gay. It is so much easier for me to find a man to be with than it is for me, especially where I live, to find love any other way. And when I finally, I had a child, I went through a divorce. And before I said anything like out loud and proud, I brought it to my mom and told her, expecting fully her to be like, just bring it to God. Just bring it to God, pray on it, that kind of thing. Like he'll change you. Instead, she did the most bizarre thing of all time and said, oh, okay, I can understand that. So next weekend, Art Prize is here. You want to go like get a hotel room and go to a gay bar? They've got a drag show. And I went, are you kidding me? Like, that is the coolest thing ever. I've never done that, but thank you. And then at that point, I felt comfortable coming out to everyone else because nobody else's opinion mattered at that point. And so when I got to do that, that was like the nicest thing ever. And like most of my friends already knew, but without me having to say anything. But to have to say it to my mom, like that was the hardest thing that I've probably ever had to do. And like now, like I live with her now. Like we're roommates, we're cool. Like, like we're both single people who decided it was easier to have a 2-income household. So you know what, move in together, and I'm raising my daughter half time. And like it's a very happy, inclusive environment on not just this side, but her dad's side as well. And it's very, very nice. But most people do not get that.
Yeah. And that right there, first off, I'll go ahead and say how freaking happy I am that you managed to find such a good and accepting environment. That right there is what churches are supposed to be. That's what we're supposed to do, and be the places where someone comes out and we're like, yeah, that's awesome. We're glad about that. We got a group of deacons that are hitting out the gay bar next week. You want to join them? That should be a thing that happens. Like I remember early on in my days at Princeton, there's a group of us that were having a conversation, and one of the conservatives, of course, asked the question, what would you do if a congregant came to you and said that they were gay? And one of the other conservatives in the group said exactly what you said just now. I would tell them to take it to God. And I'll never forget the retort that someone else in the group threw out there. And I wish to God I could take credit for this one, but I can't. When the one person says, well, you should tell them to take it to God, the other person chimes in and says, why? They're the one, God's the one who put it there in the first place.
Exactly. Exactly. He knew what I was before I was born, right? So
right? Either you believe that way or you don't. Bad literal interpretations of Jeremiah aside,
Yes, exactly. That's how I was raised.
Yeah, either you believe what you say or you don't. You can't just believe it when it applies to your own straight ass interpretation of things. So what do we do now? Like I think it's at least I hope it's easy enough for kind of us as friends, for us as a church community to sit down and say, all right, these crispy Christians, these conservative wackadoos are freaking wrong about the Bible, and they always have been. What do we do with that? What can we do now? Because Jay, I'm gathering from your story, you kind of believe much the same as I do in that religion is not inherently evil. It's just been co-opted by evil people.
Yes.
My belief is that it's time to, throw on the biblical brass knuckles and start fighting back. But like, what do we do here? What do you guys think is the way to handle this?
Traditionally, I mean, I've kind of been I tend to be like among most of my friends, like the Christian who doesn't pipe up about it all that much, but will happily chime in about, hey, God doesn't hate you, or, you know, this is, a lot of people say such and such, but they're full of crap, or here's what I think. And like, I feel like there's something to be said for, on an individual basis, just trying to kind of share God's love where people have invented God's hate. But that's like, I feel like work is worth doing on an individual basis, but I do feel like there's a massive systemic problem. And I feel like there's a lot of societal issues right now where it boils down to there's a massive systemic problem. How do we tackle this? Preferably without completely dismantling what's in place, because the fallout of that you can't imagine, you know. I feel like that's it from my perspective anyway. I think that's the case with a lot of societal ills right now, and the hateful modern church, I feel like, is definitely one of those where it's like, how do you deconstruct the illness that is pervading so much of the body of Christ right now? Like, it's not, there's this is a long way of saying I don't know, but nobody else was talking, so I always pipe in.
But for now, I want to go ahead and say thank you to anybody who's made it to the end of these 2 videos. If you're still watching here through to the end, thanks for sticking around. We really appreciate it. This has been a really great conversation that looks like it's going to keep going on here a little bit later, and I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be a lot of fun. In the meantime, if you are part of a community, you already know that. If you don't, check out our website. We're a weird community. We do the online thing way more than the physical thing. In fact, most of our community is done through our Discord server. So if you haven't had a chance to jump on that, please go ahead and jump on that. Link to that is on the website, and the link to the website is in the description. You can check out some of the other stuff we put out. We have a Psalms from the Trails series that comes out every Thursday, which I'm still excited because this last week I finally actually got to go outside because the state of emergency ended here in Kobe, freaking finally. So that's a thing. Every week we also have a more regular scripture and sermon that's happening as well. You can check here for those as well. You guys have anything you want to plug or shout out to before we end it for today?
I do. I want to shout out, well, actually plug, because it has nothing to do with me. But at this, the end of this episode, I do want people to know, especially if you need help, trevorproject.org.
Yeah.
Please go to interact.org, which is a great resource for people with intersex. And PFLAG. Check out your local PFLAG area, which is Parents, Friends, Lesbians, and Gays. Open up your community, open up your resources, and get any help or understanding that you need or your friends and family need.
Yeah. And if all of those big resources seem a little too threatening to you or a little too intimidating, as you can see, our tiny community's got more than enough people with experience in these backgrounds as well. And if nothing else, you can reach out to me privately, and I'm happy to help you out in any way that I can as well. All of that information, again, will drop in the description here. All right, you guys got anything else? No?
Nope.
All right, then I want to thank you guys for joining us today, and thank everybody who's been watching us. So everybody, have a great week. We'll see you on the next episode. Take care.